Are you unable to break that $5 million barrier in your blue collar business? What's up, blue collar business owner? Welcome back to the Blue Collar Prosperity Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Maska, where we focus on helping guide you to have a prosperous business. Today, we have with us Norris Ayvazian. Norris is the founder and CEO of Service Crucible. Norris has transformed multiple home service operations across North America, notably growing Peaden's Pensacola branch from 4 million to 12 million in just under 12 months, while maintaining 25% net profit. As a hands-on leader who's managed operations from 2 million to 60 million plus, Norris specializes in helping companies break through revenue barriers through systematic excellence. His methodology focuses on four key areas he calls the four forges. Fundamentals that transform service companies into market leaders. So that is Norris Ayvazian. Welcome, Norris. Thank you so much for being here. What's going on in Arizona today?
It's a wonderful day. No humidity, sunny, no clouds. I'm not saying this to get any feelings of animosity towards me, but Paul, I think we should wrap up the show because I can't top what you just did. You made me sound like a rock star. So thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Super excited to have you on your journeys to true inspiration, your experience. You got a ton of wisdom. So we want to get into all that. But first, for our listeners that don't know who you are, just give them kind of the backstory of how Norris got started and how he got to where he is today.
Sure. I'm third generation in the trades, been in home services for 20 years. My dad and grandpa before me were welders, fabricators. I'm Armenian by heritage. That's why you see 8 letters and a bunch of vowels in the last name. My actual Armenian first name is Noray, but it's a tongue twister. But I go by Norris. Funny enough, Norris and Noray have the same meaning, new man. So I was a army contractor for the longest time and spent a lot of time overseas during OIF and OEF. Came back to the States and kept getting laid off because when you're contracting with the military, your job security is the budget, which is tied to Congress, and we know how dependable Congress can be. And this is being just apolitical, right? So um, I decided to get into something that had job security, and I thought to myself, well, air conditioning is something that people always need. I was led onto it by a family member of mine. Started my career in Michael and Son. 2 months in, fell in love with the industry, and then held all the positions since. And it's been an incredible journey of successes, failures too, but wouldn't trade it for anything else.
Love it. Great story. And funny you mentioned Michael and Son. I'm in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. Michael and Son is everywhere, driving around in their big blue
Yeah,
trucks.
if you
So
can't, we can.
that's right. They've got Super Bowl commercials, they got commercials, they got jingles, they got radio ads, and they got trucks everywhere, and they
They had
continue to
Mike
expand.
Tyson in on a Super Bowl
They sure
commercial. That
did.
was nuts.
That is a fact. It's a small world. So super excited to have you here. Thing we
Thank you.
want to focus on today, Norris, is really kind of this glass ceiling that a lot of companies can't break. We can kind of push a rock uphill to get to a million. We can put enough technicians and a few office people in place to get to 3 to 4 million, but to get to that $5 million and above, that's like reinventing our company, in my opinion. And a lot of times we don't realize, but whatever got us here isn't going to get us there. And we got to like redo everything once we start to get to that mark and above. And you've seen it. So what are some of those, just to get us started, what are some of those big barriers that you see companies run into when they're trying to break through that $5 million barrier where the owner like isn't, integral into the day-to-day operations anymore?
I I love this question so much that I want to select the best way out of my mind how to answer this for you, Paul. And for those that are listening, it's all right. Let's go a very factual route. Over the last few years, I've been privileged enough to hold positions where I've had access and coached hundreds of home service companies that are trying to better themselves, and the vast majority of them fall below the $5 million line, and they want to get there. I always look at their financials because financials is a direct reflection of your operations and the behaviors that dictate the numbers that you see on your financials. This is a really, really scary thing. The vast majority, I would say 90% plus of financials that I saw had no GLs other than materials in their COGS. When it was direct labor, it was just direct labor. That's if they had direct labor above the line. And it goes back to one of the most influential sayings that I heard: you can't manage what you don't measure. So if you're going to add the trucks, excuse me, if you're going to add the personnel, if you're going to increase advertising, and you're just going to go after and chase the latest trend, then all you're doing is putting on 20 knee braces on a bum knee instead of going to physical therapy and changing the way that you're using your knee. Fundamentally, that's the core of the answer. There's ancillaries to that. There's, separation of install from service, capacity planning, call prioritization, optimizing and pushing your call center to the highest limits of their latent capabilities, and being 100% confident in the metrics from your call center before you decide to come to table and discuss what marketing services that you want to get. I could go on and on.
So I want to dive into some of these. So for those of you that are listening that weren't writing that down, if you're doing something, there's like 4 or 5 things here I really want to dive in. One, financials are a direct reflection of your operation. I'm a fractional CFO for companies in the trades, and this is where I start every single day, because the numbers are going to tell us the story. It's going to remove the emotion. It's going to remove the ego. It's going to remove the excuse of, well, you don't know my business. My business is different. So we're definitely going to get into that, because we want to make sure that's solidified before we add the people, add the trucks, add the new building, and do all that stuff. Because otherwise, like you said, using the knee analogy, we're really just making the problem bigger, and we're not actually solving the root of the problem. Separating service versus install. I think this is huge. And I want to get into that so that way we have the right people in the right place to, driving maximum revenue per call and all that good stuff. Call prioritization is huge. And that just doesn't mean whoever's available gets to run the next call. It really means like we want the right technician going to the right call because they have the set skills to maximize that call, serve the client the best. And then the last one, and we've talked about this on the show a lot, call center maximization. Before we say we need more leads, why don't we make sure we're getting the most out of every leads? What's our call booking rate? What about our memberships? What about, our close rate? What about our average? All those things before we just start bringing in more leads and just, basically dropping that ball. So let's start with service versus install. Give our listeners a little bit more insight and clarity into that and why it is so important to start to separate that as we have enough technicians and enough calls to do so.
Sure. So service versus install, some of the roadblocks that I see in front of business owners is being able to conceptualize it, and then taking it a step further, conceptualizing it in their CRM, their planning, their spreadsheets, however it is that they're tracking process or planning, if they've even done project management before as well. And the biggest benefit of this is that it gives you a true sense of what your capacity is for running service calls, and it puts pressure on you. There's a lot of very good information out there. And so the training and the teaching that I've got from, let's say, Michael and Son, Elias Musa, Bassem, and then over at Nexstar, when I was running a few Nexstar organizations, John Conway, Jamie Robertson, these are people that go way back and have a proven pathway of success. And so like a universal agreement that's out there is, 85% capacity out of the days of the week. So you figure out your sold days or how many installs you're going to sell. And now you can actually start seeing the money. But what is that going to take, though? Because this is where it gets more interesting as you layer it on. You got one install crew, 20 work days in the month, 85% gives you around about 17. And so that means you have to have 17 calls for these guys to install for full day so they can make their wages. But that means that, let's say, if you're filling out your board, how many service calls are you running? How many age maintenances are you running? What is the propensity of the performance that you have that'll turn them into a tech turnover. Or if you're running a selling tech model, I don't hate on either model. You know, how many calls are you going to need to run? Are you running 3 calls a day? I hope you're not running more than 4 calls a day, because then you're just churning and burning and throwing away your money. You might as well set it on fire. But okay, you figure out that count part, but what about the handoff process that's going to take place? Because the installer, you want them to be able to show up exactly on time, 8 o'clock, fully kitted out, not have to do any shop runs. That's going to add to your efficiency. Um, so when you figure out all the metrics, the next thing is, how are you going to communicate as a leader to your team what the objective is and what the goals are, so they are aligned with you? And this has to be a crawl, walk, run approach, Paul.
Yeah, and one of the things you hit on that I kind of picked up on is you're really alluding to, now we got to get to call prioritization. We got to know the numbers, and then we've got to know who's going to go to the right call, because we know that, hey, it's, this, we're going to go to this, we're going to run this maintenance call and it's aged equipment. There's a likelihood that we then need to be able to sell this, turn it over to install. However, like you said, however their model works, they might have a selling tech. They might
Yes.
they might have a comfort advisor, whatever you want to call it, but you have a call prioritization matrix, if you want to call it that, where the higher opportunity is going to go to the people who are good at higher opportunities.
Mhm.
They know how to have the conversations, they have the more experience. Whereas your new guy, brand new service tech, might go to the brand new house to put in ceiling fans or something like that if they're running an electrical call. So for those listeners that don't know what call prioritization is and how this kind of factors into the service install model to make sure we're maximizing your install team and they're working, 8 to 4 every day, producing a ton of revenue, what does call prioritization look like to Norris?
The most efficient, seamless, quickest route to getting the best tech on the best possible route, and to some extent ignoring geography to make the most of the day, generate the most amount of money, get your whip nice and fat so you can realize revenue, because sales and completed revenue are two completely different things. And so you know what amount you're ringing the cash register for on a every single daily basis. And it doesn't matter where you are in a month. If you're tracking your stuff correctly, you'll be able to know what margins you're ending it at. Coal prioritization is a customer, a CSR, not having to put a customer on hold to see when can we get to the customer. A dispatcher not having to go to the service manager and asking, hey, which tech should I put this on? CSR not hesitating and then thereby ultimately telling the customer that's got a 12-year-old system that's a no cool, or a backed up mainline saying, oh, we don't have availability today, but we can get you in first thing tomorrow. Meanwhile, this person's house is flooding or they're sweating because it's 100 degrees in the house. And then they just wrapped up, perfumed, and glitter packaged a priceless present to your competition, because that person is going to call the next person down. That is just everybody aligned with a sense of urgency, knowing what goes where to who, how it's going to be done, when it's going to be done, and what the expectations are. That's call prioritization.
Yeah, and I think that last statement, what the expectations are, when everybody on the team knows what the expectations are, it gives the confidence to the customer who's calling of like,
Yep.
these people got it going on. So if you call and say, hey, I don't have AC and I'm in Arizona in July, if we say we'll get out there tomorrow, they're gonna be like, okay, put me down, but I'm gonna call around. And then they might not even call to cancel. But if they do, you're either way, you're not running that call. However, if you have those parameters in place for everybody, hey, if we get these type of calls, it's automatic, book it today, and then we'll figure it out, after the fact, and those people are thrilled. Versus,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, we're gonna run a new, thermostat installation for a home instead of going to this house that doesn't have air conditioning. So really prioritizing, and your customers understand too. If you called somebody and said, hey, we're gonna have to come out tomorrow to put in your Nest thermostat instead of today, because an elderly
We had
person
an
doesn't have air
emergency coming.
conditioning, they're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's totally fine. This thermostat is not that big of a problem. We'll see you guys tomorrow. So like, but like you said, not just making sure the board is full, but making sure it's full of the right opportunities. Because if you're just judging them, I'm like, oh, cool, board's full with a bunch of low dollar calls, that's totally different than prioritizing the people that are calling with the emergency type issue. So
Yes, sir.
you mentioned one other thing that I want to dive into. It wasn't on my list originally, but sales versus completed revenue. And I think this is huge because I see a lot of organizations like, man, he sells like 50, he sells 50 grand a week and he's crushing it and doing all this stuff. But then their install team's booked out a couple weeks and a lot of that stuff cancels. And you're like, I don't know how to make payroll, but we're selling so much. And we fall in love with that versus how much revenue came into the cash register at the end of the day. So what are some insights, tactics, strategies around that to, kind of balance both of those so we can maximize money in the bank?
Sure. So every single job that's sold, in the warm handoff process, I call it the red folder process, that I created years ago. Yep. It goes through job costing because you got to be aligned with your price book. You got to know what it costs. You have to have an install kit for every different variation of install that you do. What is the dollar and cent amount for a 40-gallon tanked heater? What is the dollar and cent amount for a straight AC condenser and air handler, in a vertical position? Every single detail. Yes, the upfront work is hard. It's nerdy. It's a lot of work. You have to plug in spreadsheets. You got to figure out how to have it quick access and reference. Do the damn work because it's going to pay off in dividends. And so once you have all that in place, you don't have to have that in place. You can still do a job costing nonetheless. It's just going to take you a longer time. And I'll see what my margins are, and I know what my OpEx is, my operating expense. So I roughly have an idea or an exact idea of what my net profitability is going to be. And so I prioritize my installs by the profitability because I want to eat and realize the revenue that's going to drop the most amount of money down to the bottom line as possible. The next variable in the equation as far as decision making is concerned is the amount of discount given. Obviously, it's kind of tied to the first thing, but if we had to discount this up the wazoo, put it on some financing and everything else, but I'm in a position to stand on margin, Paul, where I need to stand on margin, and protect what I built so far for the month, then I'm going to prioritize the ones that have the least amount of discounts because those people should be getting the white glove service anyways. The likelihood of them being repeat for second properties, friends, family, community, neighbors, social media, is something that I bank on as an ancillary benefit. If you're halfway through the month, you're not pacing for budget, and you know how much money you're going to lose at the end of the month because you're making payroll and you've got your fixed expenses. You may have pulled levers on your variable expenses and you're standing on margin. No, you got to eat the overhead before the overhead eats you.
So true, because you're paying it either way. No matter if you do
Yeah.
$1 or $1 million, the overhead you're paying the same amount. So, but I think that is so important, Norris, to really know the numbers, and that brings me back to the original point that you made at the very beginning. Financials equals operations, and if our financials are a mess, that means our operations are a mess. I do financial assessments every single day of people that are in the need of a fractional CFO, and maybe 1 out of 100 companies, their books are clean. They've got the labor where it's supposed to be. They've got their cost of goods sold broken out. They've got their overhead broken out, so we know we at least have an idea of what's eating us, and then we know exactly what the net profit is. And we're not even going to get into the balance sheet on this interview, but the balance sheet is usually where a lot of businesses go to die, and they don't realize it's like, wow, I got 20% net profit, but there's no money in the bank. And if we looked at the balance sheet, that's probably why. So
Yeah.
to get to $5 million and above, kind of bringing it back to the initial premise of everything we've talked about today, what are some things in financials, in operations that are critical things that we have to have in place in order to confidently scale to $5 million and above?
Efficiency, 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 communication, expectations, everybody knowing what their role is, intersecting role, capability of cross collaboration amongst departments, what the handoff process is. CS call center to dispatch, dispatch to text, text to managers, manager check-ins, and fully optimizing the capacity planning. Your daily huddle has to go to your highest priority. You have to hold your daily huddle. I don't care if somebody is late and they're driving in. They should know their numbers. They can call into the huddle. We can make them buy donuts or find some way to repent for their sins for being late. The other thing is like awareness of what your goal is. How are you going to get to 5 million, let alone a, $20,000 day, $50,000 day, whatever your latent capabilities are. If you don't know what your target is, if you don't know what's in front of you, calls are not enough. Okay. Business owners tend to have a very nostalgic moment as they start to grow because there are some very nice elements that contribute to their success. And all of a sudden they found themselves grow bigger, but they plateau. And they're like, man, I remember when the phone would ring, we had customers, there was cash flow, there was money in the bank, and right now it's all over the place and everything else. Well, it's because you're compounding your issues. And being granular in the sense that everybody knows their role, communicate, and everything else. Now you know what your kind of like your base latent capabilities are. Here's some questions that I love asking business owners. Out of the last 100 calls that your service department ran, what percentage of them do you know for a fact were offered three options? And they're like, I don't know. And I say, why don't you know? They say that, well, that's a good question. I said, how are you going to know? They're like, I'm going to make sure that I do. Are you going to put some gatekeeping measures in your dispatch calls out process? Out of the 100 calls that were $0 tickets, was there a manager assist involved? And was there a debriefing involved? Were there pictures? Were there options? Were the options tiered into each other? How was the customer experience? How much time did you spend in front of the house, in front of the customer in the house? And if you can't do these basics, right? One of my favorite books ever is The Goal by Eli Goldratt. He calls it statistical fluctuations versus dependent events. A dependent event is something you know for a fact is going to happen, right? Like the sun rising and the sun setting. If the machine's well kept, you press the button, machine turns off, you switch it off. A statistical fluctuation is something that you don't have control over, but you can influence the environment, which allows you to dictate the outcome. And so, three options: showing up on time, well groomed, call prioritization, install handoff process. Everything that we just talked about is a statistical fluctuation because of the human element in our industry. As leaders that lead and managers that have to manage, we need to have hypervigilance about that. That's how you get to 5 million and
Yeah.
above.
And everything you just hit on was maybe we'll go one more question, one more topic is the customer experience, because everything you just hit on, when we can create just amazing customer experience for the entire process, the price is irrelevant, and them thinking about getting another option, another quote. I'm going to call two more people. I'm going to get three quotes, blah, blah, blah. It kind of goes out the window. And a lot of things, Norris, you mentioned is so important to people out there. And if you're using something like ServiceTitan, it tracks all of it. Three options. You can see the average number of options that every technician gave in any given period of time. How long were they on site? How long did it go from them arriving to them putting together the options? Does it show that they actually spent time with the customer? How long did it go from them presenting options to them getting a zero? Was there enough time involved there? Did they actually have conversation? All of those things flow into the customer experience, which is another thing that you are big on. I am big on, because when we can do that, price is irrelevant. We're building a brand. We're building lifelong customers, members, all that kind of stuff. So let's just go into that real quick. You mentioned a lot of different things for the in-home customer experience, but give our listeners just few other strategies, tactics, tips on how do we make the customer experience better than, pretty much everybody else out there.
Yeah, this is actually the fourth forge in the four forges. It's the gold standard experience, customers for life. Striving to ensure every customer's interaction with you sets a gold standard experience is a consistent effort necessary to create the momentum that makes you unstoppable. And so I will piggyback that with people need to understand, if you already don't know, and it's a surprise if you wouldn't know it, that the foundational bedrock of our industry is relationships. People leave their house. They may dream about cars. They may dream about owning a very nice piece of art, going on vacation, and doing all kinds of things. However, it is very few industries, with us leading the charge, that are invited into the innermost sanctuary of a person's life, their home, where they raise their family, where they make difficult decisions, where life and death and happiness, celebrations, all kinds of things happen. And if we understand that and we treat our team as our first customer, then magical things happen. So expectations for me is the most important thing. There are things that you do, the listeners do on a daily basis, on weekly, monthly, yearly basis that involves some kind of transaction, monetary or financial. However, for you to consistently do a monetary or emotional, was what I meant to say, transaction, there is an expectation that you've come to trust and know that it's turned into a dependent event. You are making a first impression from the moment they see your brand, the moment they see your technician at a gas station pull up to their house, knock on the door, enter their home. And so laying down the groundwork of what the customer should expect, thanking them for having us in their home. And from a cultural standpoint, because it's a trickle down effect, if leadership doesn't believe in it, your techs never will. Going above and beyond for these people. Yeah.
And I think that last part is a perfect segue to kind of wrap this up is if you don't believe in it, your technicians won't. If your technicians don't believe in it, they're just not going to deliver on it. And the customer can tell, like, this person's just like reading a script. They're not really all in. They're just, they're not genuinely excited. They're not grateful. They haven't set the expectations, all that. Because we run into companies all the time where they're putting people through the process, but if you don't believe in it, it's not going to happen. So as we wrap this up, Norris, our time is coming to a close. I ask everybody on the show one question. There's a lot of things we could do within the next 24 hours. My goal with this show is to make sure everyone takes action immediately. So what is one thing out of all the things we talked about, or maybe something we didn't talk about, that our listeners could do within the next 24 hours just to start the momentum of moving their business forward?
Cancel your appointments and get in the truck and spend the entire day as a helper with one of your technicians. Get back in touch with the field, with the front line, and rediscover the magic, if you've lost sense of it, of what it is that's made you successful and be in business this long. You are the cultural heartbeat and center of your business and the reason why you're successful. And you have to protect that. Nobody can replace you.
Love it. That is super powerful. And when you get in the truck for the day, it shows everybody on your team that the owners, they're not above anything. They're not just sitting in the corner office collecting checks. They're in it together and they want to succeed together. Norris Ayvazian, thanks again for coming to the show, sharing your journey and providing a ton of actionable advice, wisdom, and strategies for all those blue collar business owners out there as we continue our journey to prosperity. But before we sign off, Norris, where can our listeners go to keep in touch with you and learn everything, what you're doing with Service Crucible?
Sure. You can go to servicecrucible.com and explore the website. I highly recommend going into the Why Us section so you can read what our core values are and what service truly means to us, because I believe service is the highest calling. And go into the pricing page where you will get a very informative breakdown of what kind of services you can come to expect. Everybody gets a free discovery call. I want to make sure that we're the right fit and that you're committed to action. I will help you identify everything it is that you need to do. But when it comes to accountability and action, that falls on you. And so we are a prescriptive coaching platform that gives you some vendor savings. There's nothing cookie cutter over here. And my commitment is to this industry, something that I love, something that's been a part of my family for generations. And I'm so thankful that you got me on the show, Paul. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Awesome, Norris. Thanks so much. There you guys go. Servicecrucible.com. Go there. Ton of resources. Connect with Norris. I promise you the time you spend with him will not go to waste. Norris, thanks again for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate it.